Our second lesson today comes from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verses 1 through 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. God will dwell with them. They will be God's peoples, and God will be with them. God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. After 13 years of training and preparation, astronaut Michael Massimino was in space for the first time. He had left the safety of the shuttle to go out to the Hubble telescope to try to repair an instrument that had failed. Now, there was no easy way to do this repair because of an access panel blocking the instrument that was attached with 117 tiny screws. When it was built, the engineers didn't think they'd ever need to open it, so they had put glue on the screw threads. But the instrument behind the panel had broken, and for the last 5 years, Massimino and his colleagues had designed over 100 new space tools that would let them get the screws out and the panel off and repair the instrument. He'd spent countless nights and weekends practicing with these tools in a simulator, and finally, the day he'd been practicing for was here. Out in space, attached to the shuttle by nothing more than a tether, Massimino started to first remove a handrail blocking the access panel. No big deal, 4 screws not glued, and the first 3 came out easily. But after working for a moment on the 4th, Massimino realized it was stripped. It wasn't coming out, which meant the handrail wasn't coming off, which meant he couldn't get to the access panel, and the 117 screws he'd worked for 5 years to figure out how to remove, which meant he couldn't repair the instrument, which meant the NASA scientists wouldn't be able to figure out if there was life on other planets, and it was all his fault. He looked at the astronaut out there next to him, but this guy was a rookie. He was there to hold the tools. He didn't know what to do. Then he looked at the shuttle where his crewmates waited, but none of them had spacesuits. They couldn't help him. Then he looked down. He had a perfect view of planet Earth, 350 miles away, and thought, there are billions of people down there, and not one of them can come and help me. Remembering that moment later, he said, "I felt this deep loneliness. It wasn't just a Saturday afternoon with a book alone. I felt utterly detached from the earth by myself. Everything I knew and loved was far away." For the last few weeks, we've been thinking theologically about loneliness and belonging. We've recognized that both are fundamental to the human experience, and that while at times they are imposed upon us, sometimes we seek out opportunities to be alone or to cultivate a sense of belonging. But a question we have yet to ponder is this: what role do we play in evoking feelings of loneliness and belonging in those around us? And what role does God call us to play? In her most recent book, Brené Brown describes moving to Houston near the end of 8th grade, just in time to try out for the high school drill team called the Bear Cadets. She writes, "This was to be my everything. In a house increasingly filled with the sound of my parents arguing, that drill team was my salvation. Just picture it. Lines of girls in white-fringed blue satin vests and short skirts, all of them wearing uniform wigs, white cowboy boots, cowboy hats, and bright red lipstick, strutting into high school football stadiums filled with crowds afraid to leave their seats during halftime, lest they miss the high kicks and perfectly choreographed routines. She goes on, to this day, I've never wanted anything in my life more than I wanted a place on that drill team. The perfection, precision, and beauty of it would not only offset the growing turmoil at home, but deliver the holy grail of belonging. I would be part of something that literally did everything in lockstep. A bear cadet was belonging personified. The day of tryouts arrived. When she got out of the car to go into the school building, she noticed that every other girl was totally made up and dressed from head to toe in blue and gold, the school colors. Brene had no makeup on and was wearing gray cotton shorts over a black leotard. Still, she knew that routine and performed it well. Before leaving on a family trip, her parents went by the school so she could see if she had been chosen, but her name was not on the list. She was crushed. But it was what happened next that made her feel the worst. She writes, I walked back to the car and got in the back seat, and my dad drove away. My parents didn't say a word, not a single word. The silence cut into me like a knife to the heart. They were ashamed of me and for me. My dad had been captain of the football team. My mom had been head of her drill team. I was nothing. My parents valued being cool and fitting in above all else. I was not cool. I did not fit in. And for the first time, I didn't belong to my family either. It is all too easy for us to cause others that pain. It is all too easy for us to exacerbate people's loneliness. Sometimes we do it because we recognize their pain. It's our pain, and we cannot bear to look at it too closely, so we push it and them away. Other times it's because we have discovered a sense of belonging, and we are going to protect it at all costs, even if it means keeping other people out. In our first sermon in this series, we looked at one of the very first stories in Genesis, when God creates two human creatures after determining it is not good for the one earth creature to be alone. Today we go all the way to the end of the Bible to hear a vision of humanity and the whole world redeemed, a vision of a city where everyone belongs and no one suffers the shame and pain of loneliness. As we look at this text, it's important to acknowledge that although we may love this vision in Revelation of a new heaven and a new earth, a place where God dwells with us and there is no more suffering, this vision is quite a contrast to what has come before. Much of the book of Revelation is not a book about belonging, but about judgment, about a time when God will decide who is in and who is out. Of course, those parts of Revelation should feel familiar to us because we are really good at casting judgment and deciding who belongs and who doesn't. And once we've decided that, generally we're really not interested in any information that suggests we might have gotten it wrong. We've seen this play out in real time over the last couple of weeks since Christine Blasey Ford accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her in high school. For the most part, people have firmly chosen which side they belong to. Either she's telling the truth and he isn't qualified to sit on the Supreme Court, or he's telling the truth and those false accusations are ruining his life and robbing him of what he deserves. There have been a lot of words spoken and written about this in the last few days, but the ones I heard that resonated most deeply with me came from an opinion piece by Frank Bruni, who criticized the caricatures that have come to dominate this discussion. He writes, "Those caricatures are out of sync with life. No set of character witnesses is the final, irrefutable words. They caught a few scenes. They didn't see the whole messy movie." He goes on, "We show different colors at different times in different situations. We age, sometimes in ways that make us better, sometimes in ways that make us worse. We fashion ourselves with or without cunning into who and what we need to be for our friends, lovers, parents, children, bosses, and employees based on their diverse expectations and ever-shifting demands." He concludes, "We are genuinely saints, and we are genuinely sinners. We are pieces that add up to an incoherent whole." This vision at the end of Revelation is a vision of a city, a community of people living together with forbearance and without suffering or pain, because God dwells right in their midst. This vision is so powerful because we know we are all saints and we are all sinners. We've all done things that should consign us to being left behind and left out. And we've all done things that should earn us the privilege of belonging to this new city of God. There is, quite simply, nothing we have done or left undone that God does not already know. But in this new vision of a new heaven and a new earth, we discover that when God makes all things new, God redeems the whole sorry story. Both the tears we've shed and the tears we've caused. It all belongs. God knows it all, sees it all, honors and forgives it all. Everything and everyone belongs. This is indeed a new heaven and a new earth when we can see the whole picture and include within that frame everything and everyone. But right now, this new creation seems a long way off from our current reality. Speaking of a long way off, back up in space, Massimino was still trying to figure out how to get the darn handrail off so he could get to the access panel. He was stuck until he got a message from ground control that they had a new idea. And lo and behold, it worked. He got the handrail off, got to the access panel with all those screws, got the screws out with those new tools, and fixed the instrument. A few days later, he returned to Earth. Driving home to his house with his wife and his kids in the car, his wife told him that while he was out on that 8-hour spacewalk to repair the telescope, she'd been watching the NASA television channel. She said she could tell how sad he felt. When he thought he couldn't make the repair, she could hear it in his voice when he was talking to ground control. And she said she had never heard him sound so sad. He realized that at the very moment he felt most alone, his wife was thinking about him. Just then they turned onto the street where they lived, and he saw the whole block decorated with American flags. His neighbors were waiting for him in the driveway, and when he got out of the car, they hugged him and told him how proud they were and how they'd been thinking of him the whole time he was in space. The next day at the return ceremony, he learned that while he was up there feeling utterly alone, the engineers and scientists at ground control were frantically running around doing everything they could to solve his problem, including contacting a space center in Maryland that pulled together a team on a Sunday afternoon, the team that eventually came up with a solution. At the time he felt most lonely, totally detached from everyone on earth, he wasn't alone at all. His family and friends, the people he worked with, people he loved, people who loved him, were with him every step of the way. We are living in a difficult moment. We are painfully, undeniably divided. Democrats from Republicans, men from women, young from old, black from white, rich from poor. At moments like these, it is so tempting to create spaces where we feel a sense of belonging and then to protect those spaces with everything we've got to make sure no one gets in who might challenge us or make us uncomfortable. But when we shut people out of the spaces we have found a sense of belonging, when we fill those spaces only with people like us, we make it all worse. We become like Michael Massimino out there in the inky black, cold darkness of outer space, staring at a problem he can't fix, convinced he's utterly on his own, when in fact everyone is back there rooting for him and frantically working to help him. We are not alone. Our situation, as difficult as it may be, is not hopeless. The God who created us and loves us and redeems us, saints and sinners that we all are, is working night and day on our behalf to fashion a new creation, a new heaven and a new earth, and God calls us to join this work, which we do by drawing the circle of belonging bigger and bigger and bigger. God's new heaven and new earth is a place we can begin to acknowledge and heal the hurt and pain we have suffered and the hurt and pain we have caused. It's a place we can know the joy of forgiving and being forgiven. A place we can feel God's presence with us in every moment. It is a place where all things can be made new. And this city God promises us and invites us to co-create is indeed a new heaven and a new earth where everything and everyone, every single one belongs. May it be so.